It's really important as we move past the latest wave of Omicron deaths and infections to pay a lot of attention to the other areas of life and society that the pandemic has had a big toll on. And in our study, we measured the impacts of the pandemic on some of these areas, particularly on employment and education, on income loss, on foregoing utilizing other health care for one's needs, and how particularly those may have disproportionately affected women compared to men around the world. So as the world moves on to the next phase, it is really important to consider all other aspects of life that the pandemic has had a big impact on, not only the direct effects on deaths and infections that we have been living with over the past 2 years. The pandemic has disproportionately affected women when it comes to employment loss, to income loss, to increased perceptions of gender-based violence, and also with regards to education and who is returning to school compared to who's dropping out of school. Even though there are a lot of areas that the pandemic has affected, our findings, we think, only scratch the surface of what the real impact of the pandemic may have been, as we have only been able to explore a few of these areas. But we think that the impact of the pandemic has been broad and is going to be felt for years to come. It has been widely discussed that the effect of the pandemic on schools and on education is very profound. Sadly, we have very little data to actually measure what is happening right now to the millions of learners around the world. But from what we know, we are quite concerned that as societies and schools go back to normal, girls will be returning to education at a lower rate compared to boys. This happened after previous crisis, and there are some indications that it is happening again as a result of COVID school closures. And it is really important that societies and governments prioritize incentivizing girls going back to school and returning to education now that schools are reopening again. Our study is the first study that has taken a comprehensive lens at the impact of the pandemic on gender disparities. And while we have not answered all the questions, we're hoping that policymakers will look at the most important areas of society and life that have been affected by COVID with respect to gender disparities in their own country and prioritize what they should be addressing first. In some regions of the world, the most severe impact has been felt in employment loss. In other regions of the world, education should be prioritized. And we're hoping that our study will contribute information needed as we move to the next phase of life and COVID-19 to prioritize the areas where the gender gaps are most pronounced and most severe.